Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Winpe Ignite PEVC Career Talk series. For those of you who don't know us, Winpe is a pioneering not-for-profit platform driving gender diversity in the investing ecosystem by increasing women's participation as investors, capital allocators, and recipients of investment capital. We work closely with PEVC firms in helping them shape and execute on DEI strategies, including hiring more women across roles and levels. When we launched in 2020 and we heard a member PEVC firms say we want to hire women but we can't find them, we were skeptical because we thought there are enough women keen on PEVC careers. In the last more than 4 years, Winpe has undertaken a number of initiatives aimed at supporting PEVC aspirants, including job bulletins, AMAs with industry leaders, boot camps with recruiters, and career fairs. Through those initiatives, we have also come to realize that the talent pipeline of women for PEVC is much thinner than we would like for various reasons. Ignite by Winpe is a platform designed to support the female talent pipeline in the PEVC industry. Ignite offers online career sessions, masterclasses, job vacancy information, and a profile bank of women interested in PVC roles, accessible to member firms in an anonymized format. So when a PVC firm hires, they can access our profile repository for candidates. The profile repository is open to women at all levels, including those already in PVC. And as I said before, we hide the candidate and firm names in the database that is shared with hiring firms. Please join the Winpe Career Network WhatsApp group to join our profile repository. This WhatsApp group will also keep you updated on our sessions and with information on job openings, which we keep posting there. I'm sharing the group link on the chat box. Now, before we move on to today, a reminder, if we do not find your name in the registration list, we will have no choice but to remove you from the webinar. So please either update your display name or fill out the registration form. Link is in the chat box. Now, moving on to today. Our topic for today is understanding PVC culture, career progression, and promotion paths. Introducing our speakers, Khushboo Shahani, Executive Director at Eversource Capital. Khushboo Shahani is the Executive Director at Eversource Capital, focusing on investments in energy efficiency, resource efficiency, and e-mobility. With over 14 years of experience, she has managed nearly $1 billion across private equity, credit, and special situations. Previously, she was VP at Eversource Capital, deploying over $150 million and Chief Manager at SBI Funds, handling distressed assets. Khushboo holds an MBA from SP Jain Institute of Management and Research and a BCom from St. Francis College, Hyderabad. Krunali Shah, she's an investor at A91 Partners. Krunali has been an investor with A91 Partners for 5 years. She is involved with investments across consumer brands, financial services, and technology. Prior to joining A91, Krunali was a part of the Boston Consulting Group. She has graduated from IIM Ahmedabad and is a chartered accountant. Rhea Grover, she's a vice president at Warburg, Pincus. At Warburg, she spends most of her time looking at financial services, fintech, and consumer sectors. Prior to joining Warburg, Rhea worked at LEK Consulting, United Nations Development Program, and a business head at a fintech startup. She completed her bachelor's from Lady Shri Ram College in Delhi University and MBA from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Sapna Goyal, she's a vice president at WaterBridge Ventures. Sapna Goyal is a seasoned investor with over 12 years of experience in early and growth stage tech startups in India. At WaterBridge Ventures, she leads seed and pre-series A investments in AI, SaaS, and deep tech. Previously, she led M&A and strategy at Uran, raising about $800 million and driving key initiatives. She began her career as a growth stage tech investor at Goldman Sachs. Sapna holds an MBA from IIM Kozhikode and a bachelor's degree from Lady Shri Ram College. She is passionate about entrepreneurship, technology, and building a more inclusive investment ecosystem. Our moderator for today is Sanjana Tulsiani. She is the Senior Vice President and Investments at R&Miller. Sanjana has over 10 years of experience across venture growth investing, equity research, and investor relations. She is a senior vice president at Iron Pillar and has been part of the founding team since 2018. At Iron Pillar, she is involved in the entire deal lifecycle from sourcing, due diligence, and documentation to portfolio company monitoring and exit. Additionally, she contributes towards investor relations and marketing. Sanjana is a CFA charter holder. She holds a master's in commerce, finance, and accounting, and bachelor's in management studies, finance, from the University of Mumbai. Now, some housekeeping notes. The session is being recorded, and an edited version of the recording will be made available for future reference. You can type your questions anytime during the session on the chat box, and Sanjana will pick them up as and when or at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, let's get started. Over to you, Sanjana.
Thanks, Ankita, for the kind introductions of all of us. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Winpe, for hosting us. This is obviously a topic that's close to all of our hearts. Where women in PE, it's been a journey, and everyone has their own individual journey. I think that from different educational backgrounds to different work experience to finally making their way to senior positions at different VC and PE firms. Hopefully the panel can, give everybody insights on their individual journeys and what they think you can do differently or that you can do to enter into the world and make your way up to partner. Just kicking off, obviously the core theme of the conversation here is what does a typical career progression look like in a PE or VC firm? I think everybody will be keen to hear, our panelists' view on what that journey looks like from analyst to partner. I know some of you have different backgrounds, going from BCG consulting firms to, more operational experience. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe Khushboo, perhaps we can start with you, and then, Krunali, Sapna, Rhea.
Yeah, thanks, Sanjana. Thank you, everyone. Pleasure to be here. So to begin with, I had a very different journey. Did not start off as, in fact, typically how people come into private equity spaces. Generally, they start off from the investment banking side and then get from the sell side to the buy side. And that's the normal entry for a lot of people, especially on the investment side. I was a lateral move. I think I did about 11 years of experience on the private credit and special situation side, and then I had made a move to the private equity side. Is that usual? That's kind of no. But considering, it's all about the skills which you bring on the table. It's more or less, you're doing investments, you're looking at the same thing, but from a different asset class. And you need to sell or cross-sell your skill sets to what isn't required in the role. So primarily, at least from the investment side, you need a bit of, other than your MBA or CA if you're coming in from the investments perspective, but also how do you do your portfolio management, networking with the founders, how do you see the sector, etc. So it's more about the skills, which can get you into the entry, and how do you convince when you want to make that switch. So ideally you start off as a entry level, but if you cannot, I'm just saying that it's not unusual that you can make a lateral move later on also.
Sure. No, I see that. I think moving laterally has definitely been something that's worked really well across industries and of course VC and PE as well. And I hear you, right? I think skill sets, key like job, a key factor as you move laterally. No, thank you for that. Krunali, what is your view? Obviously, I think you have a background coming from BCG and then moving to the investment side. What was your journey like, and what is your view?
First of all, thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks Khushboo for sharing your journey. Quite interesting, and I guess very different from the way I have ended up joining the industry. I think I've probably taken a more classic path of going to consulting, and like Khushboo and Sanjana mentioned, typically consulting and investment banking are two classic places where most of the investment firms go to hire, and especially at entry level. So while I have sort of taken that classic path. But I do know other funds which are, let's say, more sector focused and hence have prefer somebody who has, let's say, a more operational experience of that sector. Like if it's a more consumer focused fund, and let's say if somebody else has an experience at working at Unilever for maybe a few years, I do foresee somebody like that getting into an investment role, especially with some sort of background. So if we have people like that in the audience today, then I guess probably the one thing to think about is that given your background and given sort of where you worked at, you will identify some skills of investing where you are already good at. It could be either portfolio management, or it could be, let's say you've worked in investment banking and hence are pretty good at financial modeling or something. And then there will be some skills where you need to sort of get at least some basic understanding. Whatever you see lacking, once you work on that, I guess the profile still becomes a bit more well-rounded. That's one. Second, getting into this industry laterally, I think I'll be quite candid over here, given the closed room discussion. I have seen funds who are completely against it. And then there are funds who are completely in favor of it. And I'm going to be very candid about it, right? And then the easiest way to identify whether a fund is against it or in favor of it is you go and see the profiles of people in that organization on their website. And as soon as you see that, you'll be able to identify what kind of people are there in this particular organization. And typically, you will see that folks who are in a more senior position, they will end up hiring, and especially if that's worked out for that organization, they'll end up hiring similar profiles at junior level more often than not. And hence you're better off sort of looking for organizations where there are people with similar profiles, because at least they will appreciate the kind of profile you have versus trying to get into organizations where there is nobody with a similar profile, because then it'll be very hard for them to appreciate your skill set. So those are my concerns.
Interesting. I think we have obviously Khushboo, who did a lateral move. We have Krunali, who came from a consulting background, and on the other hand, we have Rhea and Sapna, whose view I'd love to hear. I know both of them were with startups in senior positions prior to this. I think Rhea spent some time at BharatPe, Sapna spent some time at Udan. I think that's another common path that we've seen moving from the startup ecosystem into investing. So Rhea, Sapna, would love to hear your journey and your view on the experience at these startups and how that kind of helped bring you into investing and how it's really helping you progress forward, having all of that operational background.
Sure. Maybe I can go and then Sapna, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you so much for having me, first of all, and excited to be here. I think I will allude to something that's a theme that's been spoken about, which is that at the end of the day, it's the skills that you bring to the table that matter. But just taking a step back, I think largely speaking, there are 2 or 3 entry points into any fund. There is one entry level point, which is typically people with few years of experience in the industry, whether it's consulting, investment banking, or I've also seen people from an operating experience, but that's less common. But that's the typical path of an analyst role or an analyst level entry. The second point of entry is typically sort of post MBA, mid-career. And the third point of entry that I've seen is effectively someone laterally. I think if you want to move laterally, the skill set overlap that you need to have with things that you would be doing at a private equity fund needs to be much higher. Versus if you're coming at the mid-level, I think it could be from an operating background or a different background where there may be a less overlap between the skills, but you need to bring something different to the table. So I think it's highly specific to when you're entering. And secondly, I think one general theme is that every fund has a unique way of operating. And that's really important to recognize, because I've seen a lot of people self-select themselves out of processes because they feel that the industry works in a certain way. I think there are very different ways of operating depending on which fund you're targeting, what kind of, do you want to do more early stage or late stage? And then what I would urge people to do is to try and think about what skill sets they bring to the table and which stage of investing do they want to do to go after, and which specific funds do they want to target who may value that particular skill set a little bit more, instead of just painting the whole industry with a broad brush stroke and saying that, okay, if I have an operating experience, I can't get in, or you may not be able to get into a certain type of fund. That is true to what Krunali mentioned, but I think you can still have a lot of avenues to enter investing. And the larger message I want to leave with everybody is to not self-select yourself out just because you feel the industry works a certain way. Sapna, handing over to you.
Yeah, I think the only point I will add is the 2 points. First, investing is a long career. So before entering into investing, you should be clear why you want to do this. And of course, try it for a couple of years. Analyst associate programs are a great platforms to try and see whether you see yourself becoming, let's say, that partner in the fund in the future or running your own fund. It's a long journey because, it takes many years to invest in a startup, see them grow or bust, exit, IPO, also see different market cycles, how investment changes, what you thought in the beginning versus what happened. So to become a good investor, you need many years. So that's one. Second point, I'd say, because I worked with a startup, it helped me a lot, especially in early stage investing. I think I became more empathetic with the founders, their journey. It's not easy to move, every 1 percentage point for your profitable, gross margin 1% up. I understood how much hard work it takes to move your revenues, to, build leadership teams. I was also able to build a lot of operator network, meaning I knew people who have been doing just technology product for many, many years, or logistics, supply chain, or business development, and so on, right? So I think it gives you a very different perspective. If you are an early stage investor, I would highly encourage have some startup experience, either as an operator or as an entrepreneur. It will make you a better investor.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for that, Rhea, Sapna. So, I think we've talked about specialized skills, but we've talked about skill sets. We've talked about different experiences allowing you to enter at different levels in the investment team, whether that's analyst, maybe like mid-level and then senior level. I would love to get your view on what you think is the right educational background at each of these 3 levels, right? I think Khushboo, Krunali, Rhea, Sapna, all 3 of you, in fact, have MBAs. Khushboo, I know that you spent time at SP Gen. Sapna and Krunali, both, I guess you're both IIM alum. And then Rhea, of course, you spent time in Wharton. So we have like a whole wide range of MBAs from different schools. So what is your view on having an MBA, a CFA, and a CA, right? How would you think this should be prioritized if you're trying to enter at analyst, mid-level, or senior level? And then finally, do you think that the skills that you learn with that educational background, does that directly influence the work that you're doing today at each of those 3 levels? Khushboo, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, I'll just start with that.
Yeah, we can go with the same order.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
So I'll be very honest, we do a lot of hiring, but we do not hire people fresh out of college. So that is why, you say that you do something.
Sure. I think Khushboo, you're going in and out.
Investment banking or consulting, is that why don't I let someone else take it up till my connection
Rali, do you want to jump?
Yeah, I can do that. So interesting question actually, and this is a debate, Sanjana, that we also keep having internally, and typically with like younger folks at A91, we keep having this debate. So like I said, different funds have different POV on this, I guess. But But I think increasingly what is happening is across the industry, I think the appreciation for not having a certain pedigree is increasing, right? And hence I think people are becoming more and more open towards folks with a different pedigree and having taken a different educational journey. And hence I wouldn't say anything is a must. Let me start with saying that. Like, I think folks do appreciate an engineering degree, also a DU education, also a CA, CFA. I think probably everything is at par to some extent. And similarly with MBA, whether you do it from like an Indian B school, you do it from a US B school, you do it from a local college. I think at some point it is all treated at par. What probably all of these indicate, in my opinion, is have you been disciplined in life and have you been consistent in whatever career path you've chosen, right? And have you gone that extra mile to sort of try and ensure you probably give your best in each of these career paths, is all these indicate. So to that extent, in whatever way you reflect and you show that on your resume, I think is good enough. At least that's the way we've been seeing it in the past couple of recruitment journeys for us. And this has evolved, right? Like earlier we still had a more set process. When I joined in 91 versus 5 years later, now I think we've evolved. Appreciation for different paths has increased. That being said, if you personally ask me, like I have done CA and MBA, and if you personally ask me, have these both degrees contributed to what I do today and have helped me do it better? I would certainly say so. CA, I think there's a direct link, right? Because I mean, you learn most of what you do in modeling or understanding financial statements, probably when you're like 17, 18, and it's then hard to like forget that. So I guess getting you up to speed on that is pretty easy if somebody's done a CA. But that being said, I've seen like so many engineers succeed and do like really well that I wouldn't say CA is a must. Similarly with CFA, but these have helped me at least do a better job. And with MBA, at least, what MBA has helped me is understand, like, appreciate marketing, appreciate operations, as two function areas of business which I didn't know anything about when I did CA. So what it means, and at least have some understanding. Like, I'll give you a good example, right? Something as basic as if I want to do a consumer survey. Like if I were to write questions for a consumer survey before doing my MBA, probably all of my questions would have been biased, right? But having done that one course of just like 0.5 credits, which just taught me how to do a consumer survey better, has helped me so much that now when I talk to vendors to do a consumer survey, like I can very easily figure out if they've applied themselves or not. Is this question biased or not? Is it comprehensive? Is it too open-ended or is it too close-ended? Are the options enough? Are the options messy? So I personally would strongly urge anybody who's contemplating to do an MBA or not. I would strongly urge that person to do an MBA, but it has nothing to do with investing as a career. It is more to do with understanding businesses.
Sure. No, thank you, Krunali. I think overall, I would definitely echo that. I think with my CFA, what I found is that at the entry level, having that financial modeling skill was super important, because as an analyst and associate, you'll spend so much time in the trenches with like three-statement financial statements expected to like build out 5-7 years on both P&L, balance sheet and cash flow statements. So having that, grassroots level financials at an entry level, I think are super helpful. And then obviously as you progress and you think of the business, and you're leading the deals, having all that, the business background, I think is super helpful. I think we have Khushboo back. If Khushboo, do you want to maybe chime in?
Yeah. So basically, when we are actually hiring for associate analyst and right up to VP, we have a modeling test and a case study as one of the rounds. So kind of what you're trying to see is, are you able to crack that round? So it's nothing to do with a CA or a CFA or an MBA, because ideally any of the three could crack it. The idea is that you should be able to read a balance sheet, evaluate, understand, and look at the numbers and give a viewpoint, right? It's all about decision making. So I would not say it's MBA, CA, or a CFA cannot do that. The idea is what you're trying to do, which is a key requirement of the job. When we start hiring for slightly higher level, which is ED, MD, and a partner level, or even at an operating partner level, that is something which is known that the person has done it, right? Either by running businesses, where they have been at a very senior position in running startups, etc., or in basically doing deals. So you're not specifically looking if the person has done that, but what you know is through the experience that the person has gauged that. So coming to the question which one of the participants has asked, pedigree. I'll be very honest with you. Typically, hiring is one of the most important decisions at any firm, whether it's for a portfolio company or it's at a PE fund. Typically, a PE fund or a VC fund would not have more than 10 to 30 people, and 30 is for the larger funds. So, at least 3 to 4 people are hiring for any given role. There are biases, there are preferences, but the reason why 3 or 4 people are looking at you is that you somehow meet the diversity requirement also, and you get the best candidate for the job. And by diversity, I don't mean a guy or a girl, I mean even geographical diversity, profile diversity, thought process diversity, because you want the decision making process to be more robust. uh, that's how you pick team players, because you want a person to sit next to you and challenge you so that collectively we all are doing better decision making. So there can be biases in terms of preferences, like if I am an IM, I would prefer an IM, or if there is. But what I'm saying is, by having a 4 people process, typically those biases can get eliminated. That's how PE firms are doing it.
Sure. Thanks, Khushboo. Rhea, Sapna, it'll be great to get your view on this. I know there's some questions coming in from a couple of people. I'll pick that up as well. But on the educational side, I think there's a view that a diversified educational background is generally helpful. Obviously, as Khushboo said, there are several people involved in the process. So biases around specific top-tier MBA programs probably get eliminated simply because there's a bunch of people all with different backgrounds, and each of them will have seen value in each of those different backgrounds. But Rhea, what was your journey like? And did you feel like having that, Wharton overseas MBA and that experience in the US, did that help, in your view, getting through to Warburg and your growth there?
Yeah. I'm going to cover this in 2 parts, which is one is getting in, and the second one is actually doing well at the job, right? And whatever the sum of your experiences is important for both. So let's talk about getting in first. Completely agree with what has already been said. I think the industry is competitive. I think it's less about having pedigree or a certain kind of MBA or anything like that. I think let's face the fact that, as Khushboo mentioned, there are very few people at any funds. And so there are multiple filtering criteria that just end up coming in. That need not be an MBA, that may be a CA or a very good work experience, but there has to be something that makes your profile sort of stand out. And so whether it is like, let's say, a top tier MBA, which could be one of the ways you can make your profile stand out, it could also very well be a very unique experience that only you have through either your work experience or something else that you've done. But I do definitely think that there needs to be a spike in your profile just by virtue of how competitive the industry is. So that's about just how you can navigate getting in. The other thing I would say is that if you're a career switcher, right, and I'm also going to talk about Pallavi's question that she's going to ask, that she's asked in the chat. But if you're a career switcher, as was the case with me, I think an MBA really helped because of 2 things. One is it gives you access to funds where people from that school are already working. So you can ask them questions in a much more casual manner, as if it was a completely cold email with no connect whatsoever. So that's access. The second thing that it helps you with is just giving time to yourself to upskill yourself. If you're working a full-time job and you're trying to switch careers, it's a challenging task for you to do. So what an MBA or any other kind of sort of study break does is allow you time to upskill yourself. And so that I found was very helpful if you're switching careers. If you're already in PEVC, then I think, at least in my view, you would have a shot as much as any person with an MBA. I think it would depend more on which fund you're applying to, which stage of investing you've done before, like I mentioned before, and which stage of investing you want to get into. The second part of it, which is what actually enables you to do well. And I don't think an MBA is particularly required for you to do well in any particular investing path. And I think Krunali spoke about this already, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But what does help is that this is a profession where there is fair degree of influence involved. There are a lot of dotted lines. It's not like you're directly able to control, let's say, a portfolio company, right? But you need to get people to agree to what you're saying, and there is a lot of soft power involved. In that way, having, like, let's say, any kind of MBA does definitely help add credibility. Now, these are all softer aspects, right? The same amount of credibility could be added in a different way. For example, domain expertise. If somebody has a very deep domain expertise in, let's say, working in fintech, they would be much better able to communicate with a fintech founder than someone else. So it could come from various ways. I think these are all just ways to add to your credibility or position yourself well in a already competitive industry. Sapna, handing over to you.
Yeah. So I'd add 2-3 points here. If you are already in a VC fund, analyst, associate levels, and VC is the only job you've done, I'd encourage you to go out, either work with a startup, be an operator, or do an MBA. I think it really broadens your perspective. You are able to then become a better investor later on in your career. And I think if you have if there is a if you are in a if you have say have a prior work experience and then you are in a VC fund or any PE fund, actually I'll talk about largely early stage investing fund that I have exposures to, and there is a partner track available to you in that fund. Then you don't necessarily need an MBA to climb up the ladder, right? So that's another point, but it's very important. Every fund is different. Every fund's policies are different. Some funds require you to go for an MBA and then come back and then try for, the senior roles, and some funds do not. So that's second point. The third point, to Pallavi's question, where you're finding it difficult to go to other funds. I think investing is a lot about building your personal brand. So I'd encourage you, Pallavi, to build your brand in the industry, be a thought leader in the sector you're investing in, build your network, and you will see then that you have an individual sort of role and place in the industry. And when you then apply to another PEVC fund, you will see that you will have more things to say, you will have a better sort of chances of entry. This is a situation when you don't want to do an MBA, or MBA is not an option for you.
Thank you. Thanks for your view on that. There's one more question actually that's come in. Maybe we can deal with that before I jump back into some of the thoughts that I had. I have a question about whether there's a transition that's easy to do from VC to PE, and how do you do that at the analyst level? Do any of the panelists want to pick that up first?
Yeah, maybe I can go. So the transition from VC to PE, there are a lot of skills that are common, definitely. But I think PE involves a certain degree of going in depth versus VC is more broader sourcing oriented. So my suggestion would be, if you could showcase your ability to go really deep into a particular company, whether it's through, let's say, your work experience or in your CV, highlighting a particular company that you have a very deep engagement with, or through the interview process where the way you think through things or talk through things has to be a little bit more in depth, as you would typically have in VC interviews. The second thing I think is a CFA would help. If you don't have it already, because I think one of the things or the skills, I don't know how much it's true, but at least one of the skills that PEs tout to have is like really in-depth accounting knowledge. So anything that demonstrates in-depth accounting knowledge would definitely help. I think given that investing experience, largely, by and large, you're using a similar part of your brain, which is making decisions or trying to diligence things, that definitely should help you or give you an edge in PE recruiting processes as well. But two tactical things that you could do is showcase in-depth experience or get some sort of a accounting certification. Those would be my suggestions.
Also, I think VC to a growth stage investing would be relatively easier transition and easier sell for you as well from a skills perspective versus directly jumping from VC grow early to PE, which is more late stage private equity.
And I think, Sanjana, what we also see for is minority and versus majority also. That also kind of changes, because when you are a control investor, the stakes, I mean, the way you conduct and run the companies is slightly more different. You're more, your ambit of control is higher. So the boards, it's basically how you're driving the boards at a higher level. But whether it's anywhere in the deal team or anywhere in the entire investment team or even the support teams, that is ESG, legal, this thing, we overall, that kind of drives, because minority investors still have board seats, but they are not in the driving the companies completely. Here, when you're driving the companies completely, it requires a certain change of mindset. So not necessarily we are expecting the incumbent and candidate to, we're not screening for that necessarily, but somewhere back of our mind, what we are seeing is, can that person switch gears? Can there be a little bit of unlearning? Because you need to, in a majority or a control situation, the buck stops at you. So typically you want to see whether the person has the ability to switch gears.
Sure. No, I hear you. So I think what we're hearing, to answer your question, is that a quant degree is helpful because you're moving from VC into PE, where there's obviously a larger focus on the numbers, on building out those models, on tracking those numbers, on tracking like KPI and metrics through financials. As Sapna said, I think that if you are in early stage, moving to growth stage VC is probably that in-between step that you need before going into PE, because obviously early stage is focused on sourcing, right? There's not that many numbers that you're looking at. So the background that you get at growth will help you move into PE. And of course, as Rhea said, and of course, as Khushboo said, being that having that sort of overall control view, the thought process, which I think again goes back to like your business basics. Those three things are probably things that'll help you move from VC to PE. So hopefully we were able to answer your question. I think there's one more question coming in. Okay, gaps on CVs, right? I think the question is that how do VC and PE firms view that? And is that a filter that you use just at level 1? Will you meet somebody who has a gap on their resume, or do you just filter them out immediately?
Maybe I can take that. And of course, like I have experience of only 91 and will be helpful to understand how others think about it. But at least I don't think we would have an inherent bias for somebody with a gap on CV to filter the person out even before like understanding why is that so. So I would be quite surprised if any organization would do that candidly. But what will certainly be helpful in these situations is like if you're applying through a headhunter or if you're sending an email, it will be helpful to sort of acknowledge that upfront and say that the gap for this XYZ months or XYZ years was for so and so reason. Because what is certainly surprising is if you have to calculate the number of months and the number of years in the resume to figure out, oh, there has been like 2 years of gap, that is a little bit of a, I wouldn't say a red flag, but that is a little bit of a bummer because you would want somebody to be explicit versus like as somebody looking at resumes and trying to build a shortlist out of it, you don't want to do the calculation all the time, right? So as far as you acknowledge it upfront, I don't think anyone would filter you out of the process.
So I took a year of break before joining WaterBridge. And one of and maybe some inputs from my experience. So I did not find it difficult or anybody judging based on the break that I took, or I had to take a step back. No, nothing like that. I think if you've taken a career break, actually here I'm assuming it's not at the start of your career, it's always typically at the middle of your career, right? So you have some work experience, and if that work experience is relevant, it does been getting you the next job, because there are things that you can talk about, there are skills that you bring to the table because of relevant work experience, which was the case with me. Other point is, if you've taken a break, I think say it proudly. Say, like, I'm sure it was taken for a reason. I don't think you have to be defensive about it. Like, I really enjoyed my 12 months and I did lots of things and so on, right? So you always actually become a better person, and so on. Outside India, at least, people view it very positively if you've done, different things in life. And the fourth thing is, I took help of a lot of women leaders in the same industry. So, I applied for some of the mentorship courses, and it just so happened the way I got my job is that the women mentor who was assigned to me as part of a program, she was an investor, and after 2 meetings, she said, "We are hiring, can join." So you could also see a lot of women being supportive in case you're not able to, find an entry point in other forms. So definitely leverage Winpe and other forums.
Thank you, Krunali, Sapna, for that view. I think generally what we're hearing is that if you've taken a gap, as long as you can own it, as long as you can say, this is what I did in my gap, this is how I progress, both personally, maybe professionally. I think that's all the answer that people in job interviews are looking for. And it doesn't seem like from the view of this panel, mine included, that's a reason for you to be filtered out early on in the process. Maybe I can go to one of the questions. I'm glad to see that we have a very interactive audience.
Hi, Sanjana. Just before you take up the question, just quickly, we want to launch the poll. It'll just take 2 minutes.
Sure. So I think Ankita will be launching a poll. If you guys can please, we would love your feedback if you don't mind giving it to us. So the next question actually aligns with something that I was going to ask in any case. I mean, promotions, right? We talked about hiring, we talked about educational background, we answered a few of the varied questions, VC to PE and so on. In terms of promotion, right? What is that trajectory look like? I'm going to extend this question. It says senior associate to partner, but I'm going to move it downward. I'm going to say analyst to partner, right? I think a lot of us have done that journey. I personally joined Ironpillar as an analyst, so I've seen that. I've seen that growth as well, and the time it takes. So I'd love to get your view on how long you think it should take. What are really the number of titles? Every fund has its own ladder, if I can call it that. Some are shorter, some are longer. And what is the kind of experience that you think at each level is looked at to get the next bump up? Khushboo, you wanna jump in first?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what it is at our firm, and it's sometimes difficult to quantify a few things in years. It's more about, again, coming back to skill sets. So analyst is typically you're not hiring people fresh out of college, but with at least 2 or 3 years, and then the analyst comes in. Analyst to associate is pretty fast. We typically take 2 years, unless the person is taking more time, but it's more like this thing. By the time you're an associate, we are expecting you to do more things by yourself. So typically when we are able to see an analyst year 2 that the person is able to take on a lot of modeling, a lot of critical thinking by themselves, that's when they're ready for an associate. Now, as you move higher, associate, and we directly have a VP because it's typically associate year 1, 2, and 3. And then if you're good, you can get immediately moved on to VP. But I have seen people move on faster, and I've seen people not move on also. Because for every role, when you're moving post associate to a VP, and then VP to an ED, and then to a managing director, and then finally a CIO kind of a role. That's how our trajectory is not about the years, it's more about what you're doing for the firm and how much how are you behaving with yourself? How are you behaving with others around you? And what are you doing for the organization as a whole? So these are the three areas of influence which we are looking at. And the more and more it's less about your ability as you go up, less about just the individual as an executor or as a contributor, more about how much you're able to take out from the team as well, how much you're making the others around you contribute and grow. So typically it's also about how you're doing independently, but also how you're influencing other people around you and making your team grow with you as and when you grow in the higher designations. So the time frame between an associate and a VP is typically 3, but it has also gone to 5 in our case where we felt that people had to take time. And a VP to an ED could be anywhere between a 2 to 3, and sometimes it's even 1 year. It's all about how much time the person is able to do the next role. Like we would want the person to do the next role when you're actually trying for the promotion. And similarly, a ED to a MD is typically when you're seeing that the person is able to do the MD's role. And that's when the performance comes in, when you're carrying the deal entirely by yourself end to end, and you're entirely carrying the team as well. So you are not just responsible for the portfolio, which you are at even at an ED level, but you just need to get the business as well and hit the targets. Typically from an MD to a partner level or a CIO level or a CEO level, it's basically when you're able to get the LPs as well. It's more about the fundraising ability. It's your reputation which is able to get 2 or 3 funds, or it's your ability to get the X amount of the corpus. So it's more about what you're getting on the table, and that translates into, so I don't want to hang it to the years itself.
Sure. No, thank you. And just given that we have, 4 women from 4 different firms, I'd actually love to hear the view of the rest of you as well. I know there's a bunch of questions coming in, and maybe we're a little short on time, but we can probably stretch beyond. And I'd love to hear everyone's view on this particular question because every firm views it so differently. Krunali, Rhea, Sapna, would you like to chime in?
Sure, I can go next. And maybe a little bit of context of A91 will probably help here. So we are a domestic fund, started like 6 years ago, and started by 3 folks who used to be at Sequoia before moving out and starting A91. So given the fund is new and given these guys have worked at another organization where they've seen certain things work out, certain things not work out, they sort of have decided a different structure. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because, especially if you're not working with a large global fund or another large setup which has existed in India for like a decade or so, like Kedara or Chris, it is quite possible that the organization that you join will be more flexible, and hence A91 context will that way maybe be a bit different. So for us, we have a pre-MBA pool of analysts who do 2 years of analyst program at A91, but that's typically not a track role, and hence they will go off to do their MBA, and most likely they will have to look for other opportunities to come back to India once they are back. And hence the track role for A91 starts from the post MBA role, right? And from there, we've kept the organization pretty flat. So there are only 3 designations. There is investor, there is partner, and there is GP. And we've been told that the time for each of these like time to move from investor to partner and partner to GP will be anywhere between 6 to 9 years. And hence one could think of like the path from, let's say, an analyst to becoming GP as maybe 15 years, right? But what is even more important is the fact that if you join any domestic fund, the success of your career is actually quite linked to how the fund performs, not as much for a global fund, right? And hence, I guess maybe 50% of my promotion to a partner or a GP will be dependent on my performance, but the other 50% will also depend on A91's performance. And hence, I guess at an early stage, especially if you're joining a domestic fund, I would say that maybe spending less time thinking of how fast the trajectory is and spending a little bit more time thinking of how well the fund is going to end up doing is going to be very important, right? Because you could be like a great performer, and if the fund would have done well, maybe you could have got a fast track role to partner in, I don't know, 5-6 years. But that won't matter if the fund doesn't do well. And hence, if the next fundraise is going to be difficult, in that situation, like there is no point of you doing well. You'll anyway have to look for another job, in which case, if the other organization knows that you're sort of in a soup because your current organization is not doing well, everybody's going to take advantage of it and maybe not give it the best designation, etc. Right? So you never know, and hence I would say that while career path is what we say it is today, this industry is risky. Like jobs are not really as certain as any other industry, and hence I would worry a little less about my designation and my trajectory. I would worry a little bit more about organization's trajectory also in that process.
Sure. I hear you. Essentially, I think one is title track, second is fun track. I appreciate that extra thought. Rhea?
Yeah, sure. I think it actually works pretty similarly to what Krunali said, and I'm also reading what Sapna is posting on the chat. The larger point is it's very flat, and individual designations don't matter as much. It matters more what you are doing, how your deals are doing, how the fund is doing. And it is, I think the distinction between, because I have worked in an operator role, the distinction between a corporate role and an investing career is very stark, at least in my mind. In a corporate structure, there is a very well-defined structure. There are milestones and roles for you to achieve. In investing, the milestones are not designation linked. They are more individual performance linked or fund performance linked. And I think keeping that view in mind is very important if you're looking at a long-term career in investing. The only other thing I'd add is that it is a very long-term path, even though it's very flat. So like Krunali mentioned, we have analyst, VP, principal, partner. The nomenclature is different, but effectively the same four stages that you can be at. But this is extremely flat. So the path actually post MBA to partner could be as long as 10 years. It could be 15 years in certain cases, but it could also be done in 7 years. And it matters more on what you're specifically working on and what milestones you're able to hit rather than your designation, so to say.
I have posted my response on the chat, so maybe I won't take more time. We can move to the next question.
Sure, Sapna. Since we're running out of time and there's a bunch of questions coming in, I'm going to throw out some of the questions, and please, any one of you feel free to chime in to give an opinion. I think there's an interesting question here on a different career path of someone who was in PEVC, became a founder, so a first-time founder, and then is planning to come back into PE and VC. So the question is, how do investors and hiring partners perceive that first-time founder journey from PE to VC to founder back to PEVC?
In case of early stage investing, it will be viewed positively. When you are a founder, when you come back and invest, you're generally a better investor.
Sure. No, thank you. Thanks, Sapna, for that. If there's any other view, or perhaps I can move to the next question. Okay. Thank you, Kanak, for your question. I think the question is, what type of investment banking experience is best suited before you try to move to a VC fund? So I assume the question is one sector, and then I'm assuming second is the tier of investment banking, right? Much like VC funds and PE funds, there are tiers of investment banking. So maybe one of you can perhaps give a view on that. Rhea, Khushboo, it'd be good to
So I can give that view for PE. I can't say for VC, which is why I was hoping someone else picks it up.
Please go ahead. Yeah, it would be great to hear your view on PE, and I think Khushboo has something as well.
Yeah, I think getting in from investment banking is a fairly track situation in PE. I have not seen us filter between tiers of investment bank as much. I think it's more on the feedback that that individual has and the deals that they've been a part of and what they've done, rather than anything else. Obviously, having said that, if you're in a tier, so to say, tier one investment bank, the chances of you having worked on a larger deal that had more visibility is more, versus but the converse is also true. You may be playing a much more bigger role in a smaller bank than you would in a tier one bank. So it really depends on your profile, and it's a fairly track role, at least at the analyst level.
Sure. Khushboo, anything to add? Any?
Yeah, nothing on the honestly the tier of the investment
Okay.
banking, because again we pick as a, it's overall profile which you're picking, and it's a mix
Sure.
of education, experience, sectors actually the one which normally you're trying to see a correlation to. So nobody's picking
All
the
right.
tier.
Sure. So Kanak, I think it's more about a well-rounded experience, both in terms of educational qualification as well as the deal that you've done at the investment bank and the sector of that deal. Hopefully that answers your question. I have something which is more on the legal side of things. The question is, I've worked as a lawyer with the PEVC industry, but then shifted gears to IT and wanted to check the diversity at head of legal level. I think we all, we've all seen perhaps different backgrounds in terms of head of legal. I think again, in my view, and I'll of course let all of you guys jump in as well. It's more about the deals that you've done, the level of negotiation that you've done. At least when Iron Pillar looks at legal hiring, that's how we think of things. I think having a PVC industry experience at any point in time is super helpful. It's such a niche industry. That having that background generally, even if there was a switch to IT and then you're coming back, I think that can be super helpful as you apply for head of legal. Maybe I'll pause to see if any of you want to add on to that.
I just have a general observation about operating roles or support roles in general, which is, if you are considering taking head of legal, any of these roles at any of the private equity funds, it matters more what your personal equation with the fund is and how much they can trust you. So if you feel you have that equation with someone at the fund, that would matter more than if you switched around and you're coming back. If you feel that you've lost that connect with the industry, then a good place to start would be perhaps a law firm that does a lot of PEVC deals, and then sort of try to work your way in through developing a personal connect with the fund. But typically those roles are more sort of, you showcase that you can do something, because the head of legal, at least, so in our case, the head of legal is centralized, but in most cases, what I've seen is they don't have a large team under them. So it's not like you can grow into that role at a fund. So you may have to start at a law firm and then move to a fund.
Sure. Thank you, Rhea, for that view. I have another question. It says, pretty straightforward on how to apply to an open position on LinkedIn, but how do you apply to dream funds when there's no open position online?
Maybe I can probably cover that.
Sure.
So at least when I was applying and when I was in B school and applying initially for internship, uh, uh, the way I had done it was one is to probably make a list of funds to begin with. Right. And once you have that list of funds, maybe go to these individual websites and figure out if there is somebody in the team where you have something in common with, right? It could be either same organization that you've worked in the past or same alma mater. But some commonality, if you can find that, then it becomes easier to reach out to that person either on LinkedIn or figure out the email ID and reach out to that person. That helped me. And I guess apart from that, look, honestly, I don't think a lot of organizations will post their vacancies on LinkedIn, at least in this industry, given every team is so small and then well knit, right? So, and given teams are very small, everybody's also way more particular about whom to hire versus, let's say, a large corporate. And in that context, nobody is most likely going to put up a LinkedIn post asking for resumes. And even if they have, there'll be some headhunter probably in between screening. So it'll be very valuable to build good headhunter relationships, right? And typical headhunters for this industry would be Michael Page, Native. These two, I guess, are the ones that we work with. There is another headhunter firm called Options Group. We worked with them for our last hiring. So yeah, those, and I'll put these names on chat also, so that will help. But I have generally found cold reach outs to be helpful, and especially if there is something in common, you can at least ask for a chat or ask for like a conversation over coffee, and you can make it explicit in saying that, look, I'm interested in applying to your organization, even if you're not looking to hire right now. I would just love to have a conversation with you to understand, what is your expectation. Maybe I'll work on that over the next year or so until there is an opening that comes up. But being explicit about your objective of why you're reaching out to that person is generally helpful versus beating around the bush. And I honestly got through in 91 through this process only. I had reached out to about 100 funds when I was looking for internship, and I got an email from Gautam, who's a partner here, saying, look, we don't hire interns, but why don't you, reach out to us next year? And people in this industry remember, like they will remember if some person has reached out to them via something, right? And especially if the profile is like remotely relevant, and they will most likely make a note of it somewhere, either forward it to their EA to keep in mind or forward it to the headhunter or something of that sort, right? And that's exactly what happened. Like a year later, when they were actually looking to hire, Gautam reached out to me because he had made a note of it somewhere. So I guess that is probably a good way to find organizations where there are similar profiles. That's an easier way to do versus just like shooting an email to everybody. There is, by the way, another tool called Lucia. I'll put this also on chat. You get a free version of it through which you can at least get email IDs. It's an add-on. It's a plugin that you can use on Google. So Lucia is the tool. And there is another tool called Magical, which you can use to draft like similar emails, etc. Both of these tools will be helpful for you if you want to apply and like write repetitive messages or repetitive emails to people.
The only point I'll add is while you're writing that LinkedIn message or the email, especially LinkedIn message, like the top 2 lines or the 3 lines should give me, let's say if I'm on the other side, a reason to open that or to reply to you. I receive a lot of emails from lots of people, mostly younger professionals looking for entry into a VC or internships at VC. It's hard to respond to everything unless something stands out. So somebody says I'm from the same college, this batch, same city, or I did this work, or I intersected with you here, or something like that, right? Or any work experience that's very, very important for me or for the fund. I think highlight that's 1 or 2, 3 lines, and ideally it should be very personalized message.
Thank you. Thanks, Krunali and Sapna. Krunali, thanks for putting down those resources as well. I'm sure it'll be super helpful for everybody attending. Okay, I have another very specific question about somebody who's working as a senior data scientist in the NBFC domain with about 4 years of experience. I think she wants to move into PE and VC, asking what would be the right entry point, and what kind of what kind of degree would help? Would it be an MS in finance, MBA, CFA, or is it possible to do that move without the degree?
See, let me be honest,
I
it's
think an
difficult to
MBA
make the
would be
move
amazing.
without, showing that, you've done something. You have to build that relation, right? You have to build that relativity, what the person is looking for and what you have. So either you do a short-term course or a long-term course. I don't want to say it has to be an MBA or something, because the journey can be different for different individuals, etc. You have to find something in your job which links with the other person's requirement. And if it is sometime like a short-term course also, or something like you're going to a VC or a PE which does investments in fintech and NBFCs, and then you say your domain knowledge, that you could possibly do. But the more different your experience, the more harder you need to try to build a bridge, right? Because you're at the end of the day justifying that why you are the best candidate. So I'm just saying, being very cognizant and not trying to brush it that it's not possible, but you just need to put in that extra effort.
Yeah. I think what I'm hearing is that because your background is in finance and because you have, domain knowledge in NBFC, perhaps a fintech fund is the best fit and the easiest fit. And to kind of help with that, having, if you don't want to do something full time like an MBA, which obviously takes you away from your work, doing something like a CFA or I think CA also might take you away from work. Doing something parallelly can help definitely bolster your resume. And having done the CFA, I can probably add in that level 1 is a basic level. I think it's more width and less depth. By the time you reach level 2 is when you're really doing the financial modeling. I would say, at least from the perspective of growth stage VC where we are, and probably PE as well, that level 2 becomes a little bit of a stamp that you need. So while you don't need all 3 levels of the CFA, I think having 2 under your belt with the NBFC background probably will set you up well for a fintech fund. Krunali,
Just one point I'll add, Sanjana, here is that in a VCP role, you're expected to know a lot more about the industry. So if you've worked in an NBFC, you should know not just about that NBFC, but NBFC industry in general. So understand different such fintech models, business models, not just NBFC, also how it evolved, what's worked, what's not worked, so that when you're in an interview or when you're trying to apply, you know the industry really well. Generally, when you're working in a company or a startup, you just tend to be very, that startup focused.
Thank you. Thanks, Sapna. So I have another question, which I think was kind of answered. I'm gonna read out the question anyway. Additional views will be helpful. But Pratiti basically has 4 years of experience in investment banking. She's a CFA charter holder and as an MBA from Duke. I think she wants to transition into PE and would love to make the shift, but she's had some trouble connecting with PE past headhunters. I think Krunali did answer that question by giving the top headhunters. I think it's the same in VC and PE. She also shared some resources. Does anyone else have something to add, or do you feel like that question was answered in terms of how to make the shift?
I just add be patient, because a lot of times there just aren't roles. So don't take it as something that I don't know how long you've been at it, but I mean, Krunali mentioned that it took her almost a year to hear back because the role wasn't there. It was a similar situation with me where I was reaching out to people for a year before I figured out that there are roles or not roles. So I think you just have to be a little patient, is what I'd say.
Thank you. Thanks, Rhea. There's an interesting question, the next one. It says that in case somebody wants to start investing in a VC fund with a small amount, say about 10 to 15 lakhs, how do they go about it? Is Angel Networks the answer? Okay, Krunali, I think do you have something to add? Rhea, Krunali?
Yeah, I guess Angel Network the other way, like I know, for instance, Waterfield is, by the way, a wealth management firm. They have fund of funds through which they invest in multiple funds as an LP. So you could reach out to these folks, like reach out to any wealth manager who generally will have an AIF through which they'll invest in other funds. So that's probably a way. I'm not really sure. But I think 10-15 lakhs for a particular fund might be a little less an amount for them to take just 115 lakhs from you. But if you do it through a fund of fund where they pool capital from different people and then invest, that's still a better way. Also, I guess with 10-15, you would probably not want to invest in only one fund. And hence fund of funds is, I believe, still a better way to invest.
Thank you, Krunali. Khushboo, something to add there?
Yeah,
Sapna?
actually, this is just a thing which I did. And so when I was making a switch from credit to equity, in fact, this is one of the questions, I had to justify. And I said that, I do investments, for VC investments myself. And I do it through platforms such as IPV, Jito, etc. So that kind of intrigued the senior management in my fund, because I said that, I'm putting my own capital. So when you're listening to those calls and your like minimum investment amount for each company, there is 2.5 lakhs in IPV. And you yourself will actually help in, go through the documents, they help you do that. And then you decide where you're investing. And that can be one of the ways that you can say, I want to make a shift, I've done this. So, and it will also help you with your investing and realizing that, how good or bad you are in a very proper platform.
Yeah, that's very much like public equity. A lot of people
Yeah.
bring out like a public equity portfolio as they apply to investing roles in public. So private is similar. Obviously, there are now platforms which allow you to invest with smaller check size. I think Sapna has put out a list as well. Okay, so one of the last few questions, I believe, is what is our view on doing an executive program in on PE and VC in particular from institutes like ISB, and does that help in moving into the PE VC industry? Navneeta, I will say one thing: it would be good to have the rest of your background as well, in addition to just the executive program. And I'll let, I think, Khushboo, do you have a view?
I mean, it completely depends. It's not just about the PEVC course. It's like I said, what the particular firm is looking for. Like we generally catched up that a CA, MBA, or a CFA can help because that is part of the investing. But it's just doing a crash course in a PEVC. I mean, I'm not so sure. Let me be very honest.
Sure. Okay, I think we've hit the end of our questions. I know we're over time by about 20 minutes. I wanted to thank everyone here for your insights, and thank you, Winpe, for hosting the session. Obviously, diversification is leading the way in both VC and PE. We've heard of strong themes of success with the right kind of skill sets, whether that's financial modeling. We talked about networking skills. We talked about specialized operational skills for sector-specific funds. Obviously, no two funds are the same. We had the panel's view in educational background, including an MBA, CA, CFA, all of which can give you an edge both while interviewing and during the job itself. And specifically a CFA, CA for PE jobs, which are more intense in terms of financials. I did see Khushboo put in a message there saying that Eversource is hiring. I think she asked for a resume that she heard was pretty impressive. I'd like to also mention Iron Pillar is hiring at the analyst level. So we obviously have Eversource and Iron Pillar both. I'll pause to see if Rhea, Sapna, Krunali, do you guys want to add something in? Khushboo, any parting thoughts?
I think I love the sharing the viewpoints, and Sapna, Krunali, Rhea brings a lot of perspective. It was a pleasure connecting with a lot of students and people who want to get into this also. And I think great experience and good to learn, good to know from the other viewpoints also, honestly. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'd just say
echo
that it is.
Go ahead, Sapna.
Right. No, I think I personally really enjoy investing. It's very dynamic, very rewarding, never gets boring, always challenges you. So if this is something that interests you, it's definitely worth fighting for, and hopefully it sets you up for longer.
Yeah, I'd echo that. Thank you so much, Winpe, all the co-panelists, the participants. Thank you for being so engaged and asking questions. If any of you have any further questions, I'd be happy to answer. So reach out to me. There may be some delays in responding because of the sheer volume of questions that we get, but I do try my best to respond to everybody. So feel free to reach out to me. And I'd also echo what Sapna mentioned. I think the career is very rewarding, but it requires a lot of patience. So if you feel that this is something that you're excited by and want to do, then have a little bit patience and just keep at it, and things work out in the long run.
Yeah, I think I think Sapna, Rhea, and Khushboo have covered everything. Thanks a lot for joining us. Thanks for being so interactive. And thanks to all the panelists as well. It was a good discussion. It was good to have your point of view as well on those things.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much, everyone. I'm going to hand back to Ankita for her parting thoughts.
Thank you, Sanjana. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We hope you found the session useful. Thank you to our speakers for such an insightful session. Requesting everyone to share your key takeaways of this session over social media with the hashtags #WinP and #WinPIgnite, and don't forget to tag Winpe. The Winpe Ignite online sessions are available on YouTube. For those of you who missed them, you can share with them or catch up on the previous sessions on YouTube. We've shared the link of the sessions on the chat box below. And once again, do join the Winpe Ignite WhatsApp group to keep yourself updated on more such sessions, job openings, and masterclasses. And do join the database that we share with our member firms to support their hiring processes. We've already shared the link to join the group in the chat box below. Now, thank you, everyone. See you, everyone, at our next talk coming up soon.